This story was shared on Reddit 8 months ago by a woman named Sarah. It had over 14,000 upvotes, and the top comment simply said, "I thought I wrote this." Think about someone right now, not your worst heartbreak, not your longest relationship. Think about the one that had no name, the one where you gave everything, your time, your softness, your 2 a.m. honesty, and received everything back except a title, except certainty, except the one sentence that would have made all of it feel real. That's the story we're telling today, and by the end of it, you're going to understand something that took Sarah 3 years of therapy to finally put into words. Sarah was 23 when she met Jake at a mutual friend's birthday. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just present. He listened when she talked, he remembered things, small things, the kind of things that make you think, this person actually sees me. They exchanged numbers that night. He texted first. Within 2 weeks they were inseparable. He cooked for her on Sundays. She kept a spare toothbrush at his apartment. They had inside jokes that no one else would understand. They spent holidays together. She met his mother, a quiet dinner, just the 3 of them, and his mother hugged her at the door when she left. She thought, this is it. This is what it's supposed to feel like. For 14 months, Sarah lived inside something that felt exactly like love. The warmth of it was real. The intimacy was real. The way he looked at her across a restaurant table, that was real too. But there was always something slightly out of reach, a distance she couldn't name, a ceiling she kept bumping into every time she tried to move forward. Whenever her friends asked, "So are you two official?" she'd smile and say, "We're just going with the flow." But privately, she was counting the months, counting the times he pulled her close in public but never introduced her as his girlfriend. Counting the mornings she woke up next to him, wondering if today would be the day he finally said it. It never was. 14 months in, on a quiet Tuesday night, Sarah asked the question. They were sitting on his couch, some show was playing in the background that neither of them was really watching, and she felt it, that familiar knot in her chest, the one that had been living there for months. She turned to him and said, "Jake, what are we?" He didn't panic, he didn't get angry, he just got quiet. And then he said the sentence that broke something inside her that she still hasn't fully repaired. "I just don't really like labels. You know I care about you. Why does a word need to change anything?" She nodded. She said, "Okay." She went home that night, sat on her bathroom floor, and cried in a way she couldn't explain to anyone, because technically nothing had happened. No one had broken up with her. No one had been cruel. There was no fight, no betrayal, no clear moment of loss. Just a quiet confirmation that she was not, and perhaps had never been, what she thought she was. She stayed, because leaving felt dramatic, because she loved him, because she told herself he just needed more time. 3 months later, she found out through a mutual friend that Jake was seeing someone new. They were Instagram official within 3 weeks. She stared at the photo for a long time. Same man, different woman, a caption that said, "She makes everything better." And Sarah thought, he just didn't like labels. That's what he told me. He just didn't like labels. Here's what no one tells you about what Sarah experienced. What broke her wasn't just a heartbreak, it was the fact that she couldn't explain why she was heartbroken. When she tried to talk about it, people said things like, "But were you even together?" Or, if there was no commitment, what did you expect? And that minimization is exactly what made it worse, because here's the truth that psychology has known for decades, and that most people never hear. The losses that destroy us most completely are not the ones we can name. They are the ones we cannot. In 1999, a family therapist named Dr. Pauline Boss introduced a concept called ambiguous loss. It describes grief that has no official ending, no funeral, no breakup conversation, no acknowledged moment of loss. The kind of grief where you are mourning something that the world doesn't recognize as real. When a relationship ends officially, your brain knows how to process it. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. You cry, you heal, you move forward. But when what you had never had a name, your brain cannot file it away. It cannot close the chapter, because the chapter was never formally opened. Sarah couldn't grieve Jake properly, because in the eyes of the world, and in his eyes, there was nothing to grieve. And that ambiguity doesn't just cause sadness, it causes confusion, self-doubt, a quiet voice that whispers, "Maybe I imagined how deep this was. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I wanted more than I deserved." That voice is a liar, but it's very convincing when you're sitting with grief that no one validates. Now, here's the second thing that was happening, underneath all of it: intermittent reinforcement. This is a behavioural psychology concept first studied by B.F. Skinner, and it explains why situationships are psychologically more addictive than actual relationships. When a reward is given sometimes, not always, not never, but sometimes, the brain becomes obsessed with pursuing it. Jake gave Sarah love, warmth, presence, intimacy. Just not consistently, and never with certainty. Some weeks he was fully there, present, affectionate, making her feel like the centre of his world. Other weeks he was distant, unavailable, just slightly out of reach, and that inconsistency, that unpredictability, kept Sarah's brain in a constant state of activation, always hoping, always trying to figure out what would bring the warm version of him back, always working harder to earn something she should have simply been given. This is not weakness, this is neuroscience. The brain under intermittent reinforcement releases dopamine not when it receives the reward, but in anticipation of the reward. The hoping itself becomes the addiction, the waiting becomes the attachment. Sarah wasn't addicted to Jake, she was addicted to the possibility of Jake, and that is almost impossible to walk away from because you're never technically being hurt. You're just always on the edge of something that feels like it could become everything. The third thing that happened to Sarah, and to every woman who has loved someone without a label, is what I call the invisible breakup. Real breakups come with acknowledgement, with a conversation, with a socially understood narrative that says, this person mattered to me, and now that relationship is over. The invisible breakup has none of that. When Jake became official with someone else, Sarah had no framework for what she was feeling. She couldn't call it a breakup. She couldn't tell people she was going through a loss. She couldn't take time off work to cry about a relationship that, officially, had never existed. She was expected to be fine, and the effort of pretending to be fine while carrying the full weight of a real loss is one of the most exhausting things a human being can do. Sarah spent 8 months after Jake doing what a lot of women in her position do. She questioned herself, she replayed conversations, she convinced herself she had misread everything, that she had been foolish for expecting more, naive for hoping, too emotional for a situation that was supposedly casual. She shrank herself to fit inside the confusion, and then, slowly, and not all at once, something shifted. It started with a single thought she had on an ordinary Thursday morning, sitting in her car before work. He introduced her as his girlfriend in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He had 14 months with me. She sat with that for a long time, and she realized something that nobody had said out loud to her yet. His inability to commit was not a reflection of her worth. It was a reflection of his readiness. When the right person came along, someone who fit what he was ready for in that moment, he had no problem with labels, no problem with Instagram posts, no problem with commitment. He was never someone who couldn't commit. He was someone who hadn't decided she was worth committing to. And that distinction, painful as it is also the beginning of freedom. Because Sarah had been carrying a question for 14 months that was never hers to answer. Am I enough? That was never the right question. The right question was, is he ready? If this story touched something in you, I want to know. Have you ever loved someone who wouldn't give you a label? Someone who gave you everything except certainty? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, send it to them. Sometimes the most healing thing in the world is just knowing someone else understands.